Good morning and good afternoon to our friends in Europe. My name is Alina Polyakova. I'm President and CEO of the Center for European Policy Analysis, coming to you from Washington, D.C.
Good morning, good to hear you.
Good morning, Mr. Minister. It's really my pleasure to welcome.
Good morning, I am ready to talk to you.
Great, it's wonderful to have you. This event, this fireside chat, we have you for 30 minutes, is part of CEPA's desire to inform the general public about how our European friends and partners are responding to the current COVID crisis, which we're all experiencing in different ways. Those of you who are tuning in, there will be time for questions that you can pose to the minister. Please, if you're Zooming with us, use the Q&A function to ask your question and we'll try to work those in. If you're following at CEPA, that's handle CEPA on Twitter or YouTube, you can also tweet your questions at us and we'll try to ask the minister as many as we possibly can. So let me open by again welcoming you, Mr. Minister. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I can only imagine you have a lot of pressing matters to attend to. So I'm grateful for the time you've taken to talk to CEPA. So let me just get right to our first question. Every country has been affected by the COVID-19 crisis, and Poland has also been mitigating the effects through lockdowns, restrictions, closing of the borders. But now Poland, like some other countries, has announced that it will be reopening some public spaces. Can you tell us more generally, what is the situation like in Poland today in terms of the crisis, and where are you in your reopening?
Thank you for inviting me to this discussion, to this chat. I think it is important to exchange opinions also through the Atlantic about the situation concerning COVID. Indeed, Poland is affected like other countries by the pandemic. We are in not a bad situation in comparison to other countries. The decision and brave decision at the very beginning allowed us to limit the spread of the pandemic. It is about 800 fatalities. So in comparison with Western Europe, for example, and other countries, the situation is rather positive. Of course, the measures were strict. They were at the very early stage, and it allowed us to limit the spread of the virus. But indeed, now we are in the process of opening up the economy and the state. Some decisions were taken, so there is a plan to do it step by step, gradually. Parks are open, kindergarten are able to be open soon. We are discussing about restaurants, also shops are open. Of course, you have to use masks everywhere and you have to maintain distance to customers. But of course, we have to react to that situation. And again, we implement measures like other countries, and now we have to start again the economy and social life, but do it gradually.
And indeed, gradual opening seems to be the key, especially as the weather gets warmer and more Europeans want to do what many Europeans enjoy doing in the summer, which is, of course, travel and take vacation. And I think that's going to become a bit of an experiment that we're all involved in together. But let me take the conversation to what's really happening in Poland today that I think a lot of our listeners and people tuning in are probably very interested to hear. Of course, Poland is one of the countries that has had to deal with holding presidential elections during a time of pandemic, which is no easy task. Can you walk us through what happened with the elections just this past weekend on May 10th? And what are we going to see over the next couple of weeks? Do we have an election date set? What are some of the challenges you're facing generally when it comes to holding a large national election during a time of lockdowns and the coronavirus crisis?
The important decisions are being taken these days. Also, first of all, according to our Constitution's presidential election should take place these, so to say, weeks. The current president was elected 5 years ago, and the 6th of August, his term expires. So it is necessary to maintain democratic system if we want to do it, but we do, to organize an election. So discussion was about how to do it during the pandemic. And the majority of the parliament, the government decided to propose to the opposition and to the society to do it in the correspondence, so to say, form through post. It was criticized, and there were further consultations. For the moment, it looks like we will have normal election, mixed election, we call it. So in person, or everybody have a possibility to cast ballot through post. They will be organized within 2 months. We are waiting for the announcement by the Speaker of the President, the date. It looks like end of June or beginning of July. So we will be in the time Constitution sets for the election, and it will be good solution. So it was also an openness to the criticisms from some international organizations, raising the point that it have to be transparent, everybody has a possibility to take part in person, and it is a kind of a democratic system which requires that. It looks like we are on a good way to have it in the transparent way. Everybody will have a possibility to take part in it, and it will be safe because the voting through post will be possible for everybody who wants that. So good decision, and important one, of course, for our democratic system.
So just to clarify, because I think there was a lot of confusion. Thank you for laying that out. So the election by ballot or by post that took place over the weekend, there was very low turnout, almost no turnout. So is the idea now to basically start over because it was too difficult to do this when it was originally planned in May 10th, and the May 10th election is de facto not being counted because the turnout was so low? Is that the idea?
That's right. There was no, the posts were not open. There were not enough time to organize that, and there was a decision of the commission responsible for the election that they did not happen, therefore it must be organized again. With some also possibilities to maintain the rights for this candidate already registered to stay registered, but it is a new election. Also, new candidates may appeal, may emerge or be proposed. It looks like a normal democratic process will take place, and it's a very good solution for Poland, for democracy.
I think certainly we in the United States will be watching how the election goes in Poland as we prepare to hold our own elections in November. And of course, there's many questions about how we can do that with public health and public safety at top of mind. But let me switch the focus a little bit to talk directly about what is your key portfolio, which is, of course, foreign policy. Poland, of course, is a key European Union and also NATO ally that the United States has worked very closely with in recent years, of course, and years before that. We're still in the midst of this crisis. It's a public health crisis, it's an economic crisis, and many now think that we will eventually get to a security crisis. So the reality is that the tail on the questions around national security, foreign policy, the consequences will be far more long-term, perhaps even than the public health effects. I think in the past, it seems like crises have tended to bring Europeans together eventually, and it's made the Transatlantic Alliance stronger. Do you think this will be the case here as you look ahead beyond even 2020 to 2021? How do you see the longer term effects on security when it comes to the effects of the coronavirus crisis?
I agree that with this who say that at the beginning of the crisis, European Union was not very active. I think that it is due to the fact that In European Union, states are sovereign. Ultimate power is within states, and they took the decisions concerning security of their citizens. It's normal. It also demonstrated where the power lies within the European Union, that this is an organization of sovereign states, and we expected that. And the health of persons and of citizens, and also security, it is in the competence of national states. But I think that the role of the European Union will be growing, and it will be important in the time of recovery. The European Union can support, can help the states to fight economic crisis, which is connected to this health crisis or pandemic coronavirus. So we will see what will be the further development, because implications or ramifications of that crisis for international relations will probably be huge, and it's difficult to assess yet the final, so to say, distribution of power, relations between a state and the European Union, the role of United Nations. But generally, I think that in our perspective, in Poland's policy, we see important role for the European Union in the next phase to support countries. So, for example, we are for substantial or big EU budget. European Union should have resources, first of all, to conduct its classical traditional policies like common agricultural policy, cohesion policy, but at the same time to have resources to finance or to help countries to overcome the economic crisis they are in now. So, we see the important role for the European Union. The discussion within the European Union is going on. We are before adopting the multi-annual financial framework, but generally Poland is for ambitious European Union, ambitious budget, and important role in Europe and in the world.
I'm glad you brought up the increasing role of the EU. We recently had a conversation with Vice President Skinas here at CEPA as well, and he talked a great deal about how the EU also has to take a leadership at the global level. You mentioned some multilateral institutions like the UN. Of course, there's also the G7 and the G20 platforms. And we've seen countries come together in this international way around a vaccine campaign and donating quite a bit of funding to that. How do you see Poland's role specifically in trying to be part of the global response, not just the European or transatlantic response, but the global response to the crisis? What role should Poland play?
We are a member of the European Union, and I think quite important one in terms of the size. And we work together. We have to consult within the European Union the policy. But at the same time, we belong to the countries of the European Union, which are for very strong transatlantic link and relations and bond. NATO plays also important role in the security sphere. So the role of Poland is to maintain or develop these transatlantic links. Our role is also, I think, on the global scene. We are active in the Middle East. We initiated together with the US the Warsaw Process, which deals with the Middle East situation. I think it is a good framework for the democratic countries, the West so-called, to deal with that crisis in the Middle East. We were the member of the Security Council until last year. And also, so these are initiatives we want to contribute to peace and stability in the world. But when I want to describe our policy, it is that we want to contribute to maintaining together the family of democratic countries, the so-called West, because we share common values and we should be united to face challenges, global challenges in the world. So for us, relations with the US are much closer and indeed strategic ones. you cannot compare them with relations with other big powers like, I don't know, Russia or China. So this is the characteristic of our policy, and we will be active in maintaining this unity or solidarity within the West.
So we have a few questions coming in from those listening in, and I would encourage others who are tuning in on Zoom to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, and to also use the hashtag #CommonCrisis to ask us questions on Twitter or tweet at us at CEPA. I want to pick up on what you just brought up, Mr. Minister, and that's, of course, Russia and China. Crises tend to be not just an opportunity for closer cooperation, but they also tend to be an opportunity to be exploited by actors who seek to undermine European coherence, democratic societies. And of course, we've seen Russia and China move quite aggressively in carrying out information influence operations, or what we could call disinformation, around the COVID-19 crisis. And I want to ask you, how do you see China's role specifically? And we'll go back to Russia as well. How has China engaged with Poland? What has been the nature of the malign influence, as we call it? And how do you think Europe and Poland especially should continue to deal with China, given where we are in the relationship?
I think that generally our relations with China are good. We have good partnership. We cooperate with China. Economic exchange is huge. We face a huge deficit. We are together with other countries in the format of 17+1. But China, it's a big player. It's very important. It's a superpower, if you wish. So we have to be united within the European Union, even broader within the transatlantic community, to face that challenge, particularly in the sphere of economic exchange. So we are for transparency, for so to say, rules in trade. During the pandemic, we imported a lot of materials, masks, and other resources necessary from China. So these relations are friendly, are good. But at the same time, for us, we also are aware of the challenge China creates for the West, for Western democracies, and we have to again be united within the West to be successful in our policy vis-a-vis China. There is a danger that China wants to divide European Union or NATO. It's very influential, strong economically and politically country. So we are aware of that. But so we have to maintain these relations, but also with the knowledge and with that they create a kind of a strategic challenge for the European Union and the West. Indeed, next half a year, it will be the German presidency within the European Union. The summit, EU-China summit, is envisaged, and we will see what will be the result of that summit. But Poland is of the opinion that we should consult our policy and coordinate within the European Union as far as relations with China is concerned. There was a plan to organize a meeting of presidents 17+1 in China. Polish president belongs to that group. These are Central European countries, not only EU member states. It was postponed due to the pandemic. We will see what will be the situation, but generally we are for the dialogue with China. Again, we'll be stronger if we are united.
So we have a few audience questions coming in that connect to what you just said about working together as a cohesive front in our negotiations and our relationship with China. There are questions now emerging around the long-term security implications, as I mentioned earlier. And this is also a question that relates to Russia. Poland is one of the NATO member states that has now been contributing and meeting the 2% of its NATO contribution as of 2019. And now there's a growing concern that resources will be diverted in many countries from defense spending towards other spending concerning public health. Do you anticipate in Poland that the commitment to common and collective defense via NATO will be affected by the crisis?
Difficult to predict what will be the policy of other countries, but generally, I think that Poland intends to maintain the level of spending on defense. Indeed, yesterday, Polish president signed a new strategic document, national strategy, in which it is confirmed that we will spend what was announced earlier for our defense. We'll see what will be the situation. Of course, we are of the opinion that we should also generate resources in order to invest in military sphere to face the challenge from other actors like Russia and others. The discussion will be going on within NATO, definitely on that. But let me also add that the countries like Russia also are touched by the pandemic, and it is a problem also for them. So we'll see what will be the result of this shift in power or in military spendings in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It is difficult to predict what awaits us, but certainly I think rethinking priorities will be top of mind for all of us. Let me bring in another audience question. This one is from Michal Baranowski. He says, Mr. Minister, thank you for your remarks, but I want to ask you about your impression regarding the impact of the COVID crisis and the perception of US leadership among Europeans, as well as to general strength of the transatlantic relations. Of course, a huge question. Do you think the US-European relationship, Transatlantic Alliance, will suffer? And what's your sense of perceptions of the United States in Poland today?
In Poland, the public opinion is very much in favor of American engagement in the world and leadership in the world, and it has not changed recently, definitely. And I think that generally there is a discussion also among scholars. We'll see what will be the result in practice, but which kind of a government is better to deal with such a challenge like pandemic? Is it autocratic government like Chinese one or Russian one, or democratic one? And the discussion is long already, but I think that there is a future before democratic countries. They are more innovative and they may find easier solution to this crisis. And I think that the US, it's a very innovative country when we think about vaccine in future or other, so to say, sources to fight pandemic. I think that we have to look at the US. So I think that the US will have and will remain the leader of the democratic world after the pandemic is curbed. So generally, it is in accordance with our looking at democracy as a superior system. So we are here rather positive as far as the US role is concerned. There was a very good discussion between Polish President Andrzej Duda and Donald Trump on our strategic relationship in the time of pandemic. We have to demonstrate also maybe more solidarity between the European countries and the US. There was a good visit of Polish doctors working in the hospital in Chicago as a symbolic gesture. We are discussing about strengthening our cooperation in the military sphere, in the military domain with the US. Nothing has changed. and definitely we want to strengthen transatlantic bonds.
So, Mr. Minister, now is the lightning round, as we call it, of quick questions. I do want to bring in a couple of these great questions into the conversation. We have one question from Joanna Pluszinska, and she is the political and general news reporter for Reuters, based in Poland. She would like to ask if the new format of voting in the presidential election, the mixed voting format, will allow the Polish diaspora to vote as well. What is the plan for them to participate in the way they would like in the upcoming elections?
We call it mixed voting because the previous one, the law is not in force, was a correspondence voting, but it's traditional voting with the possibility to vote through post. Indeed, the voting of Polish diaspora is competence of the foreign minister. So we are in touch in all governments where there is Polish citizens. And for us, it was easier to organize it in the correspondence form because some countries with the pandemic, with the development of pandemic, simply refused to organize ballot on their territory unless it is in correspondence form. So according to the law, it is not yet in force, but it will be the possibility to organize correspondence voting in these countries, or personal one if it is allowed, or both. So very good solution for Polish diaspora. Everybody, I hope, in most countries in the world, for sure in the ones if there is a large Polish diaspora, will be possibility to vote. So we are satisfied with this law as institutions responsible for organization of voting abroad.
Let me ask you just one final question, if I may, and this one is from Ambassador April Foley. Can you comment on your perspectives on the Visegrad Four? The Visegrad Four, of course, are the four countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary. What's your view of whether that will continue to be an effective bloc that will work together?
Well, this is a very successful, so to say, format of cooperation. We talk very often with the ministers. Currently, the Czech Republic has presidency in that format. We will take over as Poland 1st of July. We already discussed with the Czech. I discussed with the Minister Petriček some steps. For example, one of meetings which was supposed to take place in Prague was postponed to the autumn. It was V4 plus Eastern partner countries, 6 of them. So we discussed in Poland to have it next half of the year in person or maybe through video conference. Indeed, when you look at the situation with pandemic, these countries are doing quite well. So the number of persons infected is relatively lower than in Western Europe. So very good decisions at early stage. And now I think that it is appreciated everywhere. It also demonstrates, when you look at the serious issues, that not only Western countries could be a model for others. When you look at the pandemic, I think our policy was better. Our government was better in predicting the consequences and in taking brave decisions. We are proud of that, and we cooperate together with these countries, and we want to contribute to the knowledge of the European Union, how to deal with the pandemic and how to find also ways out of that difficult situation.
So thank you, Mr. Minister, so much for your time. And thank you for answering so many of the questions from the audience. We at CEPA will continue to work closely with you. We just recently hosted a discussion on World War II memory with your ambassador in Washington, Ambassador Piotr Wilczek, and hopefully we'll hope to have many more conversations under better times. And so I wish you the best. I hope you stay well and healthy. Best of luck with the many things you have on your plate. Thank you so much for joining us and taking this time.